Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Mayor, City of San Diego, Jerry Sanders. Managing Partner, Floodgate, Anne Miura-Ko. Executive Director, Colorado Cleantech Industry Association, Christine Shapard. The Herb Kelleher Chair and J. Marion West Chair for Management and Sociology, the University of Texas at Austin, John Sibley Butler. And our moderator, anchor CNBC, Maria Bartiromo.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you tonight. We are talking about job creation on this panel. And you know, there are some really interesting things going on across the country right now in terms of innovative ideas to create jobs. There's also a number of industries, actually, that are soaring. And you don't really see that a lot in the headlines. So we're going to talk about that tonight with our panel, because we are looking at a handful of industries that really are standouts in this country, whether it be healthcare, biofuels, clean technology, a number of other areas within energy that we want to get to. And we've got the panel really that have expert ideas on it. So we're going to get into it. We also have some Twitter questions, and certainly we want to hear from you as well. We want this to be a dialogue and a conversation rather than a Q&A. So I'll get right into it. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. And I guess one of the things that I think is important to mention is education, as well as the areas of the country seeing where the job spurts are, and of course the sectors of the economy of where the growth is. Because after those last jobs numbers that we just saw and all of this gloom and doom that we're constantly hearing about, it's easy to forget that in fact we're actually seeing some real vibrancy going on across the world. And I want to kick it off with you, because you are in the venture capital business and you really see a lot of startup entrepreneurialism going on in the world today. And why don't you tell us about where you're seeing it and what's happening in that sector of the economy, because this is very different than anything we're seeing elsewhere.
Yeah, and at Floodgate, we invest in startups at what we call either the early stage or way too early stage. And we really love companies who other people aren't believing in at that moment. And what we're finding is that there's huge amounts of innovation obviously happening in Silicon Valley, but we're finding that in Austin, in Boston, in New York City. And we're finding that, you know, students also in universities all across the country are also coming up with incredible technical innovation that we believe will be fundable in the future.
You know, we want to talk about how this is happening also, because I guess it's a lot easier today to start your own business than it ever has been because of the web and outsourcing and things like that. So characterize that for a bit right now.
Yeah, so what we call this is the democratization of entrepreneurship. And this is something that, you know, as a PhD student at Stanford, I really saw back in 2003, blade servers was a huge deal because you could buy these blade servers for really cheap. And students could actually start a business based on really cheap hardware and open source software. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen cloud services take off, more commoditized technology, and the ability for students and a regular entrepreneur to just come along and try a business out on their credit card. And to me, that's a huge shift in what's happened within entrepreneurship. And that means to me, as a venture capitalist, the money that we provide isn't really the gating factor for whether or not a person can become an entrepreneur. So we believe at Floodgate that capital needs to be deployed as a service. Really, ultimately, what that means is it shouldn't be defined by our business model, but by yours. And so if you're an entrepreneur, how much money do you need? That should determine what we give you. What services do you need around those dollars? What kind of legal services? What kind of recruiters do you need? What other people do you need to mentor you through that process? That's what we provide in addition to the dollars that we provide. And I think that's the huge opportunity here.
You know, Anne in the green room a moment ago said, you know, you would think that when you give a young person $3 million, they might say, you know what, I'm going to take this $3 million and I'm off to Mexico. But in fact, they don't. They look at the $3 million and they say, I'm going to turn this into $1 billion. And I love that can-do attitude. We're getting a little taste of everybody on the panel, and then we'll jump into a conversation, all of us. Jerry, I think it's really, really impressive what you've done in San Diego. And when you look at just the sheer numbers, I want to hear the background on this, because the sheer numbers are 11.6% unemployment in California. And in San Diego, you've gotten that all the way down to what, 8.5% right now? So how have you done it, and where are the jobs?
Well, you know, we have really been able to capitalize on our universities and the military. They have their largest research, naval spay wars, where they do about the same amount of research as UCSD and San Diego State. And they have attracted more Nobel laureates to San Diego than any other city in the country. And with that comes the entrepreneurship, because the universities and SPAWAR are pumping out ideas all the time. And I know Camille from Connect was up here last year. They created a brand new company every single day of the year. So they had 365 startups. Now, that doesn't include the new Cleantech sector, which 4 years ago had about 100 companies, and now we're up over 800 companies. And that is building in biofuels, it's building in solar, it's building in batteries, it's building in all that. And we're seeing, because we have 82 research institutions now, like SOC and like Scripps, where they are providing the fuel to these entrepreneurs, and all of them work together in a collaborative approach. So whether you're in the high-tech sector or in the biotech sector or in the clean tech sector, you have councils that work across all those lines to do the mentorship, to do the collaboration, to do the types of things you need with infrastructure, the attorneys and the insurance companies and all of that. So we've just seen a tremendous growth in that, and it just continues to build on itself.
And it's not just the sort of technical areas like clean tech. You're also doing a fair amount in breweries?
Well, that's my personal favorite. We have brew tech. We now have 50 microbreweries in San Diego County. We've got 6 brand new breweries in the city of San Diego just in the last year. And we have a dedicated manager that goes out and attracts microbrewers to San Diego, because they're creating a lot of jobs. And each one of the jobs they create in a brewery has a multiplier effect of about 5.7 jobs. So we're seeing that really take off. We just had the largest conference that the Craft Beer Association has. And at 4,000, they were turning away people at the door, and these were people from all over the world.
So the beer industry has its own trade group.
Well, it does have its own trade group, and I promised to tap the first keg at every brewery, so it's perfect.
You know, a lot of this is about technology, isn't it? And John, I want to hear from you here, because technology is enabling so much in so many industries, and most people don't realize the growth that we're seeing when it comes to healthcare and other areas. Talk to us about what you're doing and what you're seeing as it relates to health technology.
Well, absolutely. You know, we set out to create what we call a science city. That is, to wrap a science city around our traditional industries, such as oil and gas, in the state of Texas. And I would never be a Texan and say that Texas has created 4 times the amount of jobs than any other region in America. But I think that I can say that.
I've got to follow up on that if you're done with this. I want to know why Texas is creating all these jobs.
I think what's important is this. First of all, of course, the universities are important, and people are willing to invest. And of course, when the entrepreneur spirit is there, there's a synergy between the new ideas, the wealth, and of course, all of the things that are necessary, especially the mentoring. So we've talked a lot about how companies are built and the different kinds of industries that are built. So on the technology side, as we created this Technopolis, we kind of wrapped it around software. That is, we started with software. And from the software came the television of the world. And then Michael, Mr. Dell created Dell Computers. And then John Mackey did Whole Foods. Jim Tressard did National Instruments. But the vibrance of the community and of the entire state was really, really related to that person who said, we can. And in this case, I think it was a person by the name of George Kosmeski, a former dean of the business school. So therefore, if you look at my region, we have traditional kinds of enterprises, such as oil and gas. But we're also working on clean energy. We're working on wireless. We're working on traditional IT, because one thing we know is this. What's happening in the laboratories, as the mayor said, the research laboratories are so important for the future of job creation and wealth creation. And when you begin to look at and try to rebuild the future, You certainly concentrate on classic kind of enterprises. We've got the best restaurants in the world in Austin. We've got South by Southwest in Austin. And that was done in an interesting kind of way to fill the gap when other students went on spring break. But as a result, the entrepreneurial spirit has come. And as my colleague was just saying, there are so many mentors because you must have in place governmental regulation. You must have in place the importance of the academy, or in our case, academia. And of course, you must have the business people in place. And all of those things create a synergy that produces jobs. And it's very, very interesting to keep it going.
So I want to walk out of this room tonight and have a real understanding as far as where the growth in the economy is, where are the jobs, where are you actually seeing the innovative ideas that have created these new ideas. And I think clusters is one thing that I know that we're going to get into. I think that's a really important one. And also, what are the challenges to job creation? What are those barriers that, you know, have really been issues in terms of hampering some of this? Chris, you're looking at clean technology. I want to know what specifically, what is clean technology? It has legs in a lot of industries, right? Energy. Talk to us about that.
Sure. You know, it really does cover everything from the renewable energies like wind and solar and biofuels through advanced transportation, which aren't just electric vehicles, but it's new combustion engines, new drivetrains, all the way through to energy efficiency products that go into buildings, energy storage products, all the way, at least in Colorado, we assume that water technology, advanced water technology, just to, you know, make the world a cleaner, better place, fits into clean tech. And all of these guys kind of have the same vision. And so it all fits into that one clean tech definition.
So practically speaking, what kind of jobs are we talking about? And what's the skill set required?
It's different for every sector. It's different for every size of company in those sectors. So some of the small startups, they have very specialized needs that maybe there's only 3 or 4 people in the world that have those abilities. Then to the manufacturers, you know, the wind turbine and manufacturers have different needs. So it's really everything from PhDs down to the technicians with high school degrees. So yeah.
So, you know what, that's one of the barriers that I think we'll talk about as we get into this conversation, and I hope now everybody will jump in terms of a real conversation here. But one of the barriers is that when I speak to CEOs and managers of businesses, whether young or you know, more mature businesses, they can't find the people that they need. They can't find the skill sets that are required to actually thrive in some of those businesses. So I want you to think about that and talk to us about getting around that.
Well, you know, I think one of the problems that I've heard from a lot of the employers, Qualcomm, some of the very large employers, is they go and get people who have been trained by our workforce partnership, which is federal money, and they don't have the skill sets they need after that training. And the ideas that a lot of these groups have is that money should go to them so that they can hire folks, train them on site, and then move ahead. And I think the second one is the community colleges, which we've heard all day. And we have to get the communication going between all the different technology clusters that we have, telling the community colleges what types of skills they need, very specific skills, and maybe even providing some of the instructors for that so we get the skilled workforce we need.
Because isn't that the point? We really, how are you going to operate in this new normal when you don't even know what you need to operate in this new normal?
And Maria, one of the things that we're doing in clean tech is because it's such a new industry, we don't have a lot of seasoned executives who have gone out and raised money and taken products into the marketplace. So we're actually taking executives from other industries, from software, telecom, biotech, giving them a deep understanding of what it means, what the regulatory barriers are, what the go-to-market strategies are for clean technology so that we can get more of these you know, successful companies out in the marketplace.
And this is why it's so important to learn how to learn. That is, one of the things that we know over the last, especially 20 to 30 years, is that industries change so fast. And you hire people who know how to learn. So therefore, we think about those people who were at one time in the typewriter industry, who moved to the computer industry, and those people who are now looking at the software in the clouds. The question is, how can we get industry to understand that you have to have people who actually know how to learn? And that sort of goes back to how people are basically educated and how they are trained.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I did a show recently where we did it in Pittsburgh, which is, of course, like steel country. And, you know, one guy stood up from the audience, he was a steel worker, and he said, look, I've been working in a steel mill for 25 years. I've got a family to feed, and I just lost my job. The steel mill closed. What do I know about producing a solar panel? And I thought, you're right, you know nothing about producing a solar panel. That's the point. So how could you expect the jobs of yesterday to be the jobs of tomorrow? It's just not going to happen.
You know, what I think is interesting is that a lot of times it's not about that specific expertise that you're looking for. In some of my startup companies, what they're looking for is that ability to be creative, right? And it goes back to sort of your ability to learn. So I was talking to one of the founders of Cafe Press, and I was asking them about their facilities and how did you find a facilities manager that was really high quality? And they were looking for someone in operations. And instead of looking for someone who had exactly the same background for Cafe Press, they started to list, these are the creative things that we want that person to be able to do. Turns out they found this person who was working in a chicken, like Foster's chicken, one of the mills there. And so he was an operations person in poultry and was brought into a high-tech operations center. And so I believe that a lot of these jobs are actually transferable, and it's about how do we figure out how we translate the skill sets and the expertise that's already nascent within our workforce and translate them to someplace else.
Just like you said earlier in the green room, you know, you remember a time when, you know, even in Palo Alto, it was all farmland.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Palo Alto, and I remember going through Sunnyvale, and there were apricot farms there. And, you know, I think you brought up the fact that the great thing about Silicon Valley is that it didn't have this older industry that we had to continue to support. And because of that blank slate, we were able to really create a new industry there that wasn't weighed down by anything else.
Well, it was certainly true with Austin. I mean, we did not have the great jobs or the great industrial jobs. They were just not there. So that meant that you had less baggage to deal with when you were being creative and creating other kinds and types of energies.
I think that's one of the similarities we all found within the clusters that are up here.
Mm-hmm. So is the onus on government or is the onus on business to teach us what we need to learn for the new normal? I mean, let's face it, I don't want my doctor to stop learning. I want him to know or her to know all of the innovations in medicine. So why isn't that throughout the employment story, that you're constantly learning?
And I think it has to be a partnership because institutions like the community colleges and the universities, they don't always know the latest skill sets that are needed. They have curriculum. It's not that easy to change that quickly. And I think business has to be a part of that. And in these research institutions, they can tell the rest of the university what the skills are going to need, that are going to be needed when they do this. And there has to be a much closer working relationship, I think, between business and dictating exactly what they need so that we're preparing the people to go into those jobs. But, you know, I go back to a prior life when I was a police officer in San Diego, and you're looking for much what you said. You're looking for people who have, it's not only a skill set, it's a habit set, it's a lifestyle set, it's people that you can train. And I think that a lot of these folks think they maybe can't do these jobs, but with the proper training, all of them can do those jobs. And I think that's what we need to start getting across to the communities.
I think there's also a huge opportunity leveraging technology now as a platform for getting this education out. And you know, we're seeing this around Stanford with companies like Coursera, Udacity, and then another professor at Stanford is trying to open source some of the entrepreneurship education that we're creating at venturelab.org. And you know, one of the professors put up all of his information online. It turns out, you know, 80,000 students throughout the world signed up for this. And it was, you know, students not only in the US, but in Africa, in Russia, in China. And so that ability to take really great content and put it out there and have people be able to learn real time, I think is going to be really, it's going to change the way in which people continue to learn throughout their lives.
And it's important that also, if you look at America in the different regions, that is, if government does not have everything set up in the region, then we would take every entrepreneur from Louisiana and from Alabama and from Illinois and bring them to Austin so that they can do well. I think that San Diego, we have what we have learned, and certainly we've learned in Silicon Valley, because, in the 30 years ago, Austin lost most of its best and brightest to Silicon Valley in 128 in Boston. And then, of course, in the 1990s, we brought them all home. So it's important, it's very, very important that government understand the competitive nature of regions, and that we will make everybody Texans if we can, if they know how to make and create enterprises.
Well, and I'll comment on that because, Colorado doesn't have a lot of money to attract those type of companies. So our strategy has always been, we're going to grow our own. We're going to form those ecosystems around the universities and around the entrepreneurs, the investors, all of those support services, make sure the government, understands what the industry needs. And we're just building our own. We're not trying to attract them.
I'm glad you actually, Ann, brought up foreign markets, because let's talk about that for a moment. We've been talking so much over the last couple of years as a country about the growth being outside of the United States and tapping into some of that strength outside of the United States. Also, there are barriers in the United States because of immigration issues. What are you guys seeing?
I see huge issues with H-1B visas, as an example. I teach at Stanford, and some of our best students end up going back to their home countries after being trained rigorously in our universities with our government funding. And some of these students also want to start up their own companies and create jobs. We have fabulous immigrants within my portfolio that have created countless jobs for Americans, and it would be a great opportunity for us to have people continue to create those types of jobs using things like H-1B visas.
Chris, are you seeing that as well in terms of folks going outside of the U.S.?
For sales, for strategic partners, for money, the Cleantech companies in Colorado, at least, are not looking at the U.S. market. The ones producing technology, producing products and technologies, and I think most of that is simply because of the lack of a U.S. energy policy. Other countries are investing; they are looking toward the future, and ours is just a political football, and that hurts companies' ability to raise money.
I think that one of the things that has been good in the San Diego region is that our Economic Development Corporation and the Chamber and the city and all of them work together with Tijuana, and we're only 15 miles from the border in downtown San Diego. And we now market the Cali Baja region, which is maquiladoras, and they have over 1,100 in Mexico, very sophisticated manufacturing facilities where their headquarters and intellectual research and development side is in San Diego. And we market that worldwide now because a lot of the talent is in Mexico. Very sophisticated medical device manufacturing. Most of the televisions in the United States come from Tijuana, with the headquarters on the San Diego side. So there's ways to get around that sometimes, and ways to work with another country so that you're still getting the benefit of that. While we wait for Washington to work on the immigration issues, we can't really wait to do the manufacturing.
You said a moment ago that you've gone from, 140 companies to more than 800 companies in San Diego for Cleantech.
Right.
How did you do that?
Well, we worked with the industry. The Cleantech San Diego started. The city of San Diego was a partner. But it was a lot of the large companies and then a lot of very small companies, and they collaborated with biotech. In fact, their headquarters for Cleantech is right with biotech. Biotech kind of took them under their wing because they're very similar companies. And we started seeing some real growth in bioalgae. We have Scripps has the Bioalgal Institute. We have 3 of the largest 5 global companies in producing that. We have Synthetic Genomics, we have General Dynamics, we have Sapphire Energy. All of them have actually produced jet fuel out of algae.
So you've got biofuels, and then there's solar.
And then there's solar, and we have a brand new French company, Soitec, which has come into San Diego just recently that we worked very hard to get their silicon's a Spanish company. Kyocera is a Japanese company. All of them have their North American manufacturing in San Diego, and they're here because San Diego, #1, is the #1 solar city in California. So there's a demand there. But also these industries feed on each other because when they're together, they can share the workers, they can share the ideas. They compete very hard, but they collaborate in San Diego tremendously, and it goes across all the different disciplines. So you'll find wireless companies in the cleantech space, and you'll find cleantech companies in the biotech space. It's really become an ecosystem that's very collaborative but very competitive.
As we also have in Texas, we have a great program with Mexico. It's called TechBA. And what we've done is to bring Mexican companies to our ecosystem. And they can scale in North America. They can do great things in North America. And they, of course, when doing that, they get contracts and all the mentoring. We also just completed building a building in Monterey, because Monterey is where it is clustering in Mexico. We also work some with Israel. We work a lot with Taiwan. We're doing projects also in Portugal. So I think it's important to, as a university, you can work with different kinds of elements and the different kinds of clustering, because what's happening in different countries is it's clustering there also. So it's clustering in Portugal in certain places, it's clustering in Mexico, in Monterey, in Taiwan, it's clustering. So I think that's very, very interesting where you have to work internationally.
I'm glad you mentioned clusters, because that's really one of the positive parts of this story, isn't it? Explain to the audience what a cluster is.
Well, cluster is the whole idea since Alfred Marshall's 1870 book, The Principles of Economics. He argued that innovative people will always cluster. The ideas themselves will always cluster. And with that will come the necessary resources to create enterprises. In our day, what's happening is companies like to be around each other. So therefore, one of the great things about Silicon Valley, for example, in Austin and also San Diego, and I'm sure in your part of the world, in Colorado, we've been having a lot of give and take with Colorado, is that, as we were saying earlier, there's almost a co-opetition. People like to be around each other who are competing with each other. So like-minded people really like to cluster. To really understand that if I want to be a movie star, I go to Hollywood because of the clustering. If I want to be a country and western singer, I go to Nashville. If I want to start a company, I go to Austin, because the clustering, the clustering and the ecosystem is built for the country western singer to do great, and the ecosystem is built for you to do great things in Silicon Valley or San Diego or in Boulder. So it's that relationship between how like-minded people who like to do great things come together to create new synergies for new enterprises.
And how do you decide who to give money to? How do you decide what an exciting new idea might be and that you think it could be a big winner?
Well, we have a pretty simple approach to investing. What we're looking for is something that we call thunder lizards. And thunder lizards are inspired by Godzilla. So these are the entrepreneurs, and this isn't technical business speak, because I'm not really good at that, but they are the entrepreneurs who have that DNA that's hatched from radioactive atomic eggs, and then they swim across the Pacific Ocean and emerge in Tokyo Harbor with an attitude, and then they proceed to sort of eat trains and stomp on buildings and create general havoc. That's what we're looking for, right? And what does that mean? So what that means is we're looking for authentic entrepreneurs. This is the kind of entrepreneur, when you go to them and you say, okay, if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing? And then they can list 10 other ideas, then I'm fleeing in another direction. I'm looking for that entrepreneur who says, well, I can't really think of anything else because this is consuming me 24/7. And then we're looking for a huge opportunity. So a big market that they're trying to attack so that you have the surface area to be successful. And then the last part that's really important, I think, is ultimately that you have to have a really unique technical or market insight that's non-consensus but right. So if it's non-consensus but wrong, we're hosed anyway. But hopefully, if it's consensus and right, there's too much competition, right? So you have to look at some place where not a lot of people are looking, but you're right. And ultimately, when we find those companies, those are the ones that's just totally successful.
And for those folks who want to start a business, the most important thing is business plan to get started?
Oh, no way. So these days we say, business plan doesn't survive first contact with customer. So I'm looking for business model. I'm looking for someone who has hypotheses around their customer, their users, their pricing model, their channels, their customer demand creation, and then we iterate on all of those different areas. In the class that I teach at Stanford, we say throw away that business plan because the professors, the VCs never read it in the first place. Let's talk about the business model. That's all we care about.
Okay, all right. Let me read a question from Twitter because we've got some tweets. What is the most innovative and creative startup you have seen geared to change or disrupt in America? Disruptors in America.
In the last 2 years?
Whatever. You pick your time frame.
Well, it was obvious. It was the airplane going from when Amelia Earhart.
No, we want to know what you're seeing now. I mean, we're trying to figure out where the jobs are. Come on.
Well, in the last 5 years, it was a company in Austin called Glowfish, which is from the biotech area. It is a freshwater fish with all the characteristics of a saltwater fish, started by Alan Blake, a former finance student at the University of Texas at Austin.
I'll take that. There's a math student that came out of Stanford who had such an innovative idea. He didn't have a business plan. He had 4 math papers. It was so crazy and so awesome that I chased him down to his classroom and stood outside his class with a check in my hand. The company's called Ayasti, and what they're trying to do is, with most big data companies, they're trying to help you find a needle in a haystack. Well, data's gotten to a point where you hardly know what the haystack looks like, and most of the time you don't even know what needle you're looking for. It's that complex, right? And that's what they're solving. And I think, in 5 years' time, that company is going to be everywhere.
I'm glad you mentioned data because I feel like nothing is growing as fast as data. And you have to protect it and you have to organize it. And that creates all new opportunities in terms of jobs and in terms of how things are going. Mobility, another major trend. 5 billion cell phones on the planet, only 1 billion of which are actually smartphones. Huge potential.
I think that what we're seeing is that these technologies now are happening so fast. And we were talking about wireless health. And we have the West Wireless Institute in San Diego where some philanthropists started out with $100 million and just said, go do good things. And they've done a fetal heart monitor that costs $50 that they use in rural areas that's read wirelessly. And so you don't have people trying to come from a rural area to a hospital because they think they have a problem. A doctor can call them and say, we're seeing something or we're not seeing anything. And they're marketing this, they're using it in rural Mexico. They're using it in rural America. Those are the types of things that I think are really going to start growing. And we've seen that synergy once again between Qualcomm and their wireless. They're taking wireless health on now. We found a whole new sector in that, and it's growing really quickly. And then you combine that with one of our newer sectors, which is our newer clusters, is analytics, where they're starting, all these companies are starting to put all this data together and figure out what they're going to do with it and put it in a readable form so that you can actually use that. So that's really an exciting one to talk about.
It's true. When you look at what's going on and what technology has enabled in all of these sectors, but put that together with this other huge trend, which is the demographics, that we're all living longer and trying to live longer. That adds a whole new element to the healthcare space.
Well, it does. And when we, once again, going back to West Wireless, another thing that they're working on is diabetes. And you simply step on a scale, and it can tell the doctor that you're dehydrated, that you've lost a little bit of fluid, or that you're starting to keep that. And
so the information is going from the scale right to the doctor.
Right to the doctor. So it's all done wirelessly so that you don't have all these expensive hospital visits if you don't need them. And if it's something that can simply be done with fluids or can be done with medication, they can call a patient and tell them to do them that at home because they've already trained them in what to do. So it's exciting, and the potential is huge for lowering healthcare costs in the United States, which seem to get higher every single year.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that as medicine becomes not just an art and a science, but a science, then there are great opportunities. And I think that it's going to be bigger than the computer industry. That is, of course, with the traditional mapping of the genome and with all of the technologies that's related to the human body, all of the interactions that's related to the human body. But we're seeing the growth in those things that are not intrusive to the human body because of FDA approval and et cetera. You know, with the human body, you can't hit Control Alt Delete when you make a mistake. You pick up the phone and call the lawyer when you make the mistake. So I think it's important to look at everything from the limb technology to how the human body moves. If you look at all of the technologies that the veterans have coming from the Gulf War, it's just absolutely fascinating. I was looking last year at a hospital bed that did everything. It moved a patient, no more lifting of patients, and et cetera. So there are tons of opportunities that would develop in the healthcare space around technology.
And talk about lowering healthcare costs. Chris, you're actually moving to lower energy costs. Talk to us about that.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, that's the only way that Cleantech is going to replace traditional energy, is if these costs come down. You know, mining coal and finding natural gas, it's an established industry. It's a lot cheaper, and so if we ever want to compete, we need to spend money to research and commercialize and bring down that manufacturing cost. So that is the key issue for Cleantech.
And here you've seen clusters. You've seen clusters that work and that don't work.
Oh, in Colorado?
Yeah, you want to tell us about that?
Sure. I mean, I've had experiences where I've had some clusters that I, being in the government, thought were going to be great for Colorado, and it was a rookie mistake that I thought the government was the group that should say, yes, this is a cluster that we should be pursuing, when it was only the research institutions that were pushing it, but there was no industry pushing it. So I realized then that you have to have industry, you have to have research, and you have to have government. And the clusters that I've been involved in that have been successful have been driven by industry first and foremost.
Which is a great way to look at public and private partnerships and how that we actually can work together. That brings me right to this Twitter question here. This is from a webcast viewer. If a certain region wants to create a cluster for a particular technology industry, who initiates that? Is it local government, business community? Is it academia? Who initiates the cluster?
Remember that most of the research funding for the clusters come from the federal government. That is, in 1989, when the research was switched from private research units to what we call now research universities, that means that the funding for most of the new technologies that also went into funding for DOD technologies, and that sort of went into clusters. So everything from, we did a company in Austin called Relax to Back, where that technology came from the technology designed to make the astronauts comfortable. And we know that the calculator came from the space program, as did, of course, the PC. So I think that in my world, it starts with the funding and the ability of universities to draw the top professors who do the research when it comes to the technology.
And I think that what we've seen too is that government has to remove the barriers. They have to help with the permitting. They have to help with all of the different parts of it. But we have seen really the universities spin this out, just as John said. And in the businesses start their own trade associations, which government can help get started with funding or with partnerships, and then really starting to publicize it. But we have just really seen the universities generate the ideas, generate the entrepreneurs which come out of the universities, and that's where much of ours has started.
Universities really are critical here, aren't they?
I would say, though, that you can have the ideas at the universities that are funded by the government, but unless there's money and unless there's entrepreneurs who are willing to take those, you don't really have a cluster.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I also believe that the ability for those entrepreneurs or the students coming out of those universities to actually stay in that geographic region is actually critical, because if they don't stay, you just have talent leakage constantly. And what's really nice about an area where you have a lot of different companies that someone can work for, there's a lot less barrier for you to actually take a job because it's lower risk. If it doesn't work out there, there's going to be another place where you can work. If you don't go to a technology cluster, then that's the major issue.
What about this? Here's a good one from the Twitter feed. There are 3 job seekers for every job posted. How do we train for the jobs that don't even exist? You've got 3, I mean, the demand is much higher than the actual availability of the job. How do you train for that?
Well, I think it's learning how to learn. I think it's, you know, it's let us again take going from typewriters to, to computers, to PCs. We didn't know much about PCs themselves, but we took people who knew how to learn and that knowledge was transferred to that industry. So I think it's like when we evaluate an enterprise that doesn't exist. You know, the question becomes, what's the comparable enterprise? You know, who's been, if you have a new way of a smart clothing, you know, clothing that would tell you how much weight you have gained and change with any kind of situation.
Well, even dumb clothing can tell you how much weight you've gained, John.
Well, the point is, we will go to the clothing industry and we would say, well, because I don't know, I would never know about that, but we would go to the clothing industry and we would say, well, how many suits are there that are sold? And then that would give us the number for that industry. So I think it's all comparable.
So if I had to recap our conversation of the last hour, it sounds like there's real opportunity in places like Austin, places like Colorado, obviously California, Silicon Valley, as well as San Diego. But what about the sectors? We talked healthcare, we talked energy, we talked technology, certainly mobility. Have I missed anything?
I think one last one would be these platforms for micro-entrepreneurship. So I've invested in a company called TaskRabbit where just anyone can become a runner of tasks for other people. And so that gives these people the ability to actually have a job in another sense, and it redefines the notion of what a job is. I think Etsy is another great platform where, you know, a housewife in Austin made a Snow White costume for my daughter, and I was able to buy it off of this platform. So there's real opportunities for these kind of micro-entrepreneurs to be spawned out of these types of platforms, and I think there's a huge opportunity there as well.
I would say not thinking along the technology lines, but the organic and natural and outdoor and beer and some of the other, you know, sectors that we traditionally don't think of. They're growing, at least in Colorado they are.
Well, people are eating better, wanting to live longer. We are living longer as a people, and so that makes a lot of sense. There's a question for you, Christine. Have you been successful in bringing clean tech to a market level that competes with traditional energy? I know some of the projects that we're talking about are long-term projects.
Right, and you know, the companies, now I personally am not running a company, I run the trade association, but the companies that I've seen that have been successful in bringing technology to a market level are those that aren't regulated as much as the energy generation technologies are in the United States. So those that don't really have to compete, but have other ways to hit the market. Those are the ones that have been most successful in transportation, smart grid, energy efficiency. Those are the ones that are having more of an impact.
I'm glad you mentioned transportation because I want to add that to my list here because transportation is also very important in the smart grid because increasingly all over the world people are moving to cities. So there are industries being created to accommodate all these people moving into the cities.
You know, we have one that actually came from Austin, and it's Car2Go. And we have the first in North America an all-electric Car2Go fleet in San Diego using public charging stations. And with some government grants, we've been able to put up about 1,500 charging stations throughout the San Diego region. Car2Go brought in a fleet of 300 all-electric smart cars, and those are all over the city now. They're going to be expanding to 600, but that was a new opportunity using electric vehicles. 10% of the electric vehicles sold in the United States are in San Diego because of that grid that's there right now. So, I mean, we have been a tremendous beneficiary of some government grants to take a look at something different and some companies' willingness to try to put that in, and then having Sempra, SDG&E actually putting in those charging stations along with some other companies and looking at the model and creating surveys. The Car2Go is a phenomena that you just see those little cars everywhere around the city. You rent it by the minute, you leave it where you leave it. We don't charge them for tickets for being in a 2-hour zone for longer than that. We think it's unique enough that it's important, and it's getting people out of cars and driving these little electric vehicles.
So you're really killing a lot of birds with one stone,
right,
if you will.
And it's just very exciting for the city. There's a lot of energy.
It really is. Right down the line very quickly, because we are out of time, what's the most important thing or item that folks need to think about if they want to thrive in this new normal? Whether it's getting a job, starting your own business, what's most important? Give me one nugget of advice. Jerry.
Well, I think you have to realize that you've got the skills. You just need to apply them to a new business. And not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, but certainly those entrepreneurs are hiring a tremendous number of people. And I think most of the workers in America can quickly adapt to that, given the opportunity and given the training.
Adaptability important. Anne?
I would say, just because we're being action-oriented here, each person in this room has something to offer. And to take that and become a mentor to someone, I think that mentorship is absolutely critical for creating clusters. And if you need to believe that you can mentor someone and take that extra step and find someone to mentor.
Know what you're good at, do what you love, and then find out where your place is in the world. Chris?
I would say government has its place when you're creating a cluster, creating a company, but don't build either one of those on the government.
John, final word.
I would say that every person is a CEO. Write down what you know how to do, what you like to do, and see if you can commercialize it.
Great advice. John, Chris, Anne, Jerry, good to see you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.